Thank you. Okay, yeah, I'm here to talk about Kanban. The topic says principles and practice because the idea is that I might walk you through some of the basics of Kanban first. But first a little about like me and my company. So I work like Darren said, I work for Reactor. We're a software house. We call ourselves a full solution software house, and what that means is that we try to have a set of people that we can do anything, any like product from an idea to production and everything that's needed. So basically, if a client has an idea, we can just come in and help them with the business concept. Then the UX, we have graphic designers, developers and testers, like the whole set. And now we also have like data scientists and all that kind of new area that's also coming along. We're about 250 people, mostly in Helsinki, but we also have a couple of other offices in Finland and also an office in Buenos Aires. There's one guy there, so it doesn't really count, but you can say it. Okay, and so what I'd like to, how I'd like to talk to you about the basics of Kanban is that I'm going to make claims about Kanban, and what I'd like for you to do after I've made these claims is to talk about them with the person sitting next to you, and talk about whether they're true or false or somewhere in between. So here come the claims. So first, Kanban is a tool for facilitating change. I'll explain them all at first, and then you can talk. So, number 2, Kanban aims at improving flow. Number 3, Kanban does not have sprints. Number 4, Kanban is a process. Number 5, Kanban introduces significant changes to the current process. Number 6, Kanban and Scrum are comparable. Number 7, Kanban aims at reducing the amount of work in progress. And number 8, Kanban is at its best when applied to maintenance work. Back to Kanban. So, here are the claims, and now I'll tell you a little about Kanban, and then we'll go back to the claims. So, Kanban can be divided into, or there's foundational principles and then there's core practices. And I'll walk you through them. So the first foundational principle of Kanban is start with what you do now. So this is not a revolutionary method. The idea is not that we change everything when we get started. The point is that we start with where we are now and we start to evolve slowly. So the first thing is start with what you do now. Second one, agree to pursue incremental evolutionary change. Well, this is a fairly vague principle, as you can see, but the idea is that we want to go for incremental and evolutionary change. So changing it little by little, adding to it as experiments give us good results. Foundational principle number 3: respect the current process, roles, responsibilities, and titles. So this is, once again, as opposed to like a revolutionary style of doing things, then we would, for example, you may have in some organizations when Scrum has been introduced, Scrum coaches come in and say like, all the middle managers or all the project managers, you're no longer necessary, or stuff like that. Well, Kanban is actually saying that we should respect the current process, roles, responsibilities, and titles, and the main point here, like why to do this, is basically just to lower the amount of change resistance. And then number 4, also a fairly sounds like a fairly vague principle, but leadership at all levels. And what this means is that the Kanban method tries to get everyone to be involved in the process improvement. And this means that anyone can have an effect on the system and change it. And this is encouraging people to do acts of leadership on all levels of the organization. So everyone who's involved with the Kanban system is allowed to change it. And then we move on to core practices. The first one is visualize. So this is actually something that you can start doing because it's a practice. So visualizing the work, and this is the theory behind, or the idea behind this is that our work has changed into knowledge work, and previously when we had like traditional manual jobs, manual labor, then we had like our work was concrete. I mean, if you're a cobbler, you repair shoes, you have one sewing machine, and then you have a pair of shoes that you're working on with that sewing machine, and then you have a queue of shoes waiting, and you can see that queue of shoes. You know how many shoes you have in the queue, and you know the pair of shoes that you're working on. But with our, like in knowledge work nowadays, we've lost that because our work is abstract. We don't work with our hands, we work with our brains. And getting an overview of our work is really difficult because like previously when a cobbler had a shelf of shoes, we have emails, we have Excels, we have to-do lists, we have product backlogs, and all of that combined is the amount of work we have. And it's really, really difficult to get an overview unless we visualize. So we, once again, make the work visible. The work that without visualizing is abstract. And how you most often see this with Kanban is through Kanban boards. But actually, the core practice doesn't really say that it has to be a Kanban board. It can be something else too. You can visualize in other ways than using Kanban boards. Here's actually an example of a visualization without a Kanban board. So this is a person who works in support, and he was kind of fed up that people kept coming into his office and telling him that you need to work on my thing really quickly. That is really important. So he started blowing balloons every time someone walks in with a new request, and he blows a balloon and throws it into the room. And then when he finishes a request, he blows breaks one balloon. So now by walking into his office and seeing the number of balloons, you can see how much work he has. So this is one way of visualizing work, getting an overview of how much work you have. Okay, core practice number 2, limit WIP. WIP meaning work in progress. And the idea behind this comes from Little's law, and this is from queuing theory. So this is actual math. So you can if you want to limit WIP, you can just tell them that this is math. This has to work. This is really important. But and it's actually, the math is not that difficult. I hope you guys can see it there at the side. But there's lead time here. Lead time is the time that, like, from an idea into production and how long that takes. For a new feature, for example, from its first idea to production, and the time spent doing that is the lead time. And so from start to end. And then there's average work in progress. So that's the amount of things that you're working on. So for example, how many features you're working on at the moment. And then there's average throughput. So the average throughput means how many items you can complete within a certain time frame. So for example, it can be if you're working with 5 features, then your throughput can be 5 features per week or something like that. And with those two, you can calculate the lead time. And now for the difficult math question of the day. If you want to decrease the lead time, what can you do? There's 2 options. Yes. So decrease this one or increase this one. Decrease WIP or increase throughput. So what are the kind of things that you can do to increase throughput? More people, train developers. Any others? Streamline the process. Yes, that can be improved. Work more hours. Yes. Perfect solution in knowledge work. Yes. Better tools. Yeah. Possibly buying new tools. Yeah. Less process overhead, yeah. Understand bottlenecks, yeah, we're getting really deep here, yeah, that's good. Remove bottlenecks, yes. Perfect, so there's a lot of things that you can do to increase the throughput. And I think most organizations are working with these. I mean, they are trying to train the people, they're trying to hire as much people as they can and do all sorts of things with the throughput. But not as many organizations are trying to limit WIP, which is the other thing that you can also do. And it doesn't mean that you have to choose one or the other. You can do both. I mean, you can still keep doing all those things that increase throughput, but you can also start limiting the WIP. And you can decrease your lead times. And when you decrease your lead times, then you get stuff done faster. And this is Little's Law. So, core practice number 2, limit WIP. Number 3, manage flow. This, I think, is most easiest to understand by looking at what would it mean to manage utilization. So if we talk about utilization, that means if we talk about machines, then utilization means how much they're being used, and you're trying to aim for the highest possible number. And that's really good for machines, but it doesn't really work that well with knowledge work. We need rest, and having a fully utilized workforce in knowledge work is not what you want. You actually want to have slack in your system. And that's what actually Kanban is saying, is that you should manage flow. So instead of focusing on utilization and making sure that everyone is busy all the time, you should be focused on how do you make work flow through the system quicker. So that's the important thing. So stop looking at if everyone is busy all the time and start looking at how do I make this piece of work go through the system quicker. And if that means that at some point someone will be sitting on their hands, that's fine. That is totally okay. If that means that the work is moving quicker. Okay. Number 4, make policies explicit. So this means process policies, things that we agree on, that we shouldn't have them as implicit things that everyone kind of knows about, but we should make them explicit and actually write them down somewhere so that, for example, when we change them, we all know that what we changed and so on. So make process policies explicit. Number 5, implement feedback loops. So feedback loops meaning you have an input to a system, then the system does something and there's an output, and when some of that output is linked back into the input, then that's a feedback loop. And when we're talking about, for example, developing software, most often that feedback that comes back is learning of some kind. And Kanban says implement feedback loops. It doesn't really tell you how or what to do exactly. But can you give me examples of feedback loops from Scrum? Retrospective. Sorry? Stand-up. The daily stand-up meeting is a feedback cycle, yes. Review, yeah. Demos, yes. Yes, those are feedback loops. So Kanban says you should implement some kind of feedback loops, but what they are is outside this scope. I mean, it's too detailed for Kanban. So you can do daily scrums or daily meetings. You can do retrospectives. You can do demos, and that's totally fine. It just says implement feedback loops. Okay, and number 6, the last one of the core practices is improve collaboratively and evolve experimentally. And once again, the point here is that we should work on this together. We should try to improve it together, and we should try to evolve it through experiments. So we do experiments. And based on those experiments and their outcomes, we either leave it like what we learned, or then just get rid of it. Simple as that. So now with this new information, take a new look at the claims for a minute or so. So talk again about the claims. Number 1, true, false, or somewhere in between. True? Anyone saying false or somewhere in between? Number 1, yeah. It's not a tool for facilitating change. Yeah. If we go back to the foundational principles, can you find things in there that say it's about facilitating change? the word change. So there's there's a couple of mentions about it. Improve, agree to pursue incremental evolutionary change, feedback loops. You know, there's a couple of mentions of it.
But it only allows you to facilitate that change. But you change to Kanban. If you want to facilitate some sort of change, you wouldn't necessarily use Kanban to facilitate any change.
But if this say Kanban's a tool for facilitating improvement, you wouldn't argue.
Yeah.
That's what proponents would say.
Yeah. But I would say that it's fairly safe to say that Kanban is a tool for facilitating change. But actually, what you might ask about is like, is it a tool? What's a tool? Is it even a framework? Yeah, mindset. Or I think if you look at the Wikipedia page, it says approach. Yeah. So the point is that it's at a fairly high abstraction level. That's the takeaway. Okay. Number 2, Kanban aims at improving flow. True. Okay. Kanban does not have sprints. True, false, true, false, true, false. Which is it? Doesn't require them, but can include them. So yeah, that's the answer. You can have sprints with Kanban, or you cannot have, you can just skip the sprints. Either is fine. I mean, the principles don't say anything about like having sprints. Or well, yeah, it doesn't say like implement feedback loops, but that's about it.
You get a pull system, though, don't you, with Kanban?
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know, does that mean that it doesn't have sprints, or you can just do what you like? You don't have to do it. That's what you're saying, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So you don't have to or I mean, if you want to do Kanban, it's going to be a pull system. If you apply or if you go with the core practices, limiting WIP and so on. But yeah, but with the sprints, I mean, you can do them or you can skip them.
I think it probably requires quite a level of maturity of the team to be able to do Kanban properly. So, you are working to pull the right stuff off the top, and you are actually trusting each other to do the right type of quality and value, and actually that can have all those checkpoints in place, and you can actually do it that way.
Yep. Correct. Agreed. Okay, number 4, Kanban is a process. False, it's an approach. Yeah. So if you think about process as phases that work needs to go through, then Kanban is not a process. It doesn't tell you anything about the phases that work. I mean, phases of work are here like development, UI review, PO review. It doesn't say anything about that kind of stuff. But I guess you could call Kanban a meta process because it's a process for looking at your process. But yeah, let's move on. Kanban introduces significant changes to the current process. Yes, no, not significant. Why? What? Over time it might. Yes. It should. Well, yeah. Well, if the system is perfect, then yeah.
The answer is yes. But if you go back to the principles, it's all in there. Managing flow, you are going to change something.
Yeah, but then again, there's start with what you do now.
Yeah, you start where you are, and
Yeah.
if you're going somewhere on that
Yeah.
journey, you will change.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
given. You will change.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
start where you are, you stay where you are.
Yeah.
You stay where you are.
So basically, if you start with Kanban tomorrow, significant changes, probably not. Over time, in months, years, probably yes. Yeah. Okay, Kanban and Scrum are comparable. Yeah, yeah. They're at a somewhat different abstraction level, I would say. I mean, of course, there can be something that you can compare with them. I mean, Scrum is more revolutionary than Kanban. Kanban is very evolutionary and stuff like that. But after that, when you go more into the details, it doesn't really make sense, a lot of sense, because they're like, Scrum has a lot of things that it says you need to do. I mean, sprint plannings, demos, retrospectives. You have to have a product owner. You have to have a Scrum master, all these kind of things. And then when you look at this is really vague compared to that. So it doesn't really make sense to compare them very often. Okay, Kanban aims at reducing the amount of work in progress. Yep. Someone could nitpick about reducing, because if it goes to 1, for example, if you have 500 developers and your WIP is 1, it's probably not a good idea. So it should be limit, not reduce always, but yeah, that's nitpicking. I personally haven't bumped into an organization that had a problem with the WIP being too small. Hasn't happened so far. Maybe that day will come. Kanban is at its best when applied to maintenance work.
I think it fits maintenance work quite easily. I think it's easy to start there, or it's easy option, but it can do a lot more.
Yeah, exactly. And
Do you mean IT maintenance work? What kind of maintenance work?
well, for example, like IT support or like like an IT or a maintenance team for a software product or something like that. That has a lot of like changing like requests coming from customers that they need to react to quickly. Yeah. It works there, but it's kind of hard to say where it's at its best. And kind of people tend to say that it's only good for maintenance work, and that's not true. You can definitely use it for product development, or you can use it for marketing or for sales. You can basically use it for any kind of knowledge work. Yep.
Don't people talk about Kanban with a capital K and Kanban with a lower K?
Yeah.
Where the lower K one is on the board, right? That's the tool.
Yeah.
And then capital K Kanban is the principles. So the tool
Yeah.
itself,
I was kind of hoping not to go there because it's really confusing, or can be really confusing. But Kanban with a small k is basically like some item, like a post-it note can be a Kanban, and then we have Kanban with a capital K, and then we have the Kanban method, which we're talking about here. And yeah, there are differences between them, but let's not really go into that right now. But what we're talking about here is the Kanban method. Yeah. Okay, we can go into that after, like during the break. Okay, let's just stop working. But yeah, let's try to move into a little practice. So actually, how to do this stuff. So I'm going to tell you a little about a real case. So this is from a teleoperator company in Finland called Elisa. So Elisa is one of the major, I think it's actually the biggest teleoperator company in Finland. And they have this service called My Elisa, which is a service for business customers that business customers can use it to, like if they get a new employee or something, they can use My Elisa to order a new SIM card and order a new phone for the employee. And if an employee needs the PUK number, if they mistype their PIN or something like that, they can use My Elisa to get that PUK number from My Elisa and stuff like that. So it's a self-service channel for businesses. The idea of why Elisa is implementing this service or wants a service like this is to increase the level of self-service. So basically that they don't have to have that many people answering phones and actually doing that work manually, but that businesses can actually do them by themselves with the system provided. And the other reason is also to increase the level of automation. So basically that when you have a new order of a phone, that there's fewer manual steps that need to be carried out for that order to go through. So they were also hoping with My Elisa to increase the level of automation. And My Elisa the development was started in 2007, I think. it was back then. It was like, well, it started with a small group, but fairly quickly it moved into like around 25 people altogether, of which about 15 were developers, mostly from Reactor, and then the POs, and there were like product owners, and then domain specialists that came from Elisa. And when it started in 2007, it was a greenfield project. So basically, there was no code. We could start from scratch, or well, could start from scratch. Of course, I'm not sure if that was a good thing. I mean, there was a lot of integrations that we needed to do, and stuff that needed to be implemented. But I mean, we didn't have any legacy code base that we needed to deal with, except for some legacy systems, but no code that we needed to deal with. And back then, how we started with the development was that we split it into 3 Scrum teams. So 3 Scrum teams with different focuses, and they just started working on it, and it actually worked out really well. We got really extraordinary results in fairly quick time, or fairly short time, and it was really a major success, and also business-wise for Elisa. And then after like 4 years or so, in 2011, it started having issues. And the issues were related to the fact that it had started out as a greenfield project, but after 4 years, it was no longer a greenfield project, nowhere near a greenfield project. It was more like this. It was a big project with millions of lines of code and a lot of like really difficult integrations and all that kind of stuff. A lot of things had happened in 4 years. So the demand, actually the demand had changed. What this means is that when we started, it was only new features. We were only working on new features because that's all we needed to work with. But after 4 years, we also had like bugs that had been reported and we needed to fix. We had the issue of a big code base growing more and more complex all the time. And we had to do like actively try to prevent it from growing too big, like doing refactorings and stuff like that. And then we had like stuff that like improving the infra of the system from a developer perspective, so that we have better tools for the developers, so that they're like they can be more productive. Things like that we needed to do that we didn't need to work on 4 years ago when we started. So the demand had changed, but the system had not adapted. It was still the same thing. We were working like it was a greenfield project. So that's something that we needed to change. Another thing was the team structure that we had. So we had this team structure of core, new products, and web store. Web store was working on an upcoming web store, but then there was core and new products. New products was always working on a set of like a new integration into the system. A new product was being integrated into My Elisa. And they were always working on one integration. Then when they finished that one, they'd move it onto core. They would take care of it after that. And the new products would start working on a new integration, a new product being integrated into My Elisa. And then core, what they were doing was that they were basically adding small new features and also making sure that the code base doesn't grow too big. So trying to make sure that it stays manageable. So what happened was that there was a blame game going on. Because some of you, I guess, already guessed it, but so the core team was pissed off at new products team because new products team, when a deadline was getting nearer, they'd start skipping on quality, even though they shouldn't. Of course they shouldn't, but it happened. And then they moved the stuff that they had worked on for core, and core was blaming new products for poor quality. So basically that they produce shit, and core has to take care of that. But then again, it also worked the other way around, that core was also blaming, new products was also blaming core because core was doing a lot of major refactorings because they were trying to keep the code base manageable. And because of those major refactorings, they also broke the build much more often than new products team. And if you broke the build, you couldn't install stuff into the test servers. So basically, new products was blaming core for constantly breaking the build and preventing them from being able to work properly. So there was a constant like blame game ongoing. And this was not a people issue. I mean, this was really good developers, really nice people. This has nothing to do with like having two teams of assholes. Nothing like that. It was really good people. So what we realized was that it was actually the structure that was wrong. The structure was causing this. And we needed to figure out to do it somehow with a structure that would actually make people work together. So what we actually did was we didn't actually follow the start with what you do now, not at all, because we changed a lot in one like major leap. We stopped having 3 teams. We just had one group of people working from one board. And we stopped having sprint plannings. We stopped estimating. Well, yeah, a lot of like major things that we just stopped doing altogether. And this is a picture from the development of Maja-Liisa. So there's around this is from a daily meeting. Around 25 people were present at daily meetings. There's the Kanban board. There's me facilitating the daily meeting. And the idea was that there's work on the board. There's people. Make it happen. Make it happen. So there were no people could completely self-organize and pull work. And we basically put the different teams into, this is a copy of that wall. So the teams were now lanes on the Kanban board, but people weren't assigned to lanes. You could just pick work anywhere. Just start working on any of the items that you had. And we added bugs and infra. Previously, we hadn't worked on them. Hardly any. The bugs would just if something got really critical, then we'd fix it. But otherwise, they just get thrown around. But now we actually started working with bugs and infra, and WebStore was finished by this time, so that's why it's not there. So this is what we moved into. And yeah, let me explain the wall. So this is basically a copy of this board here. And the phases of this work here is we had development. Well, first backlog, then we had development, which included a lot of testing. Also, the developers were doing a lot of automated testing. After that, it went to UI review. So the idea was that the UI people would look through it and see if there's something that it's not, it doesn't look like it's supposed to look like. And then the POs would take a look at it because they know a lot more about the domain, the developers, and so on. And they kind of make sure that it's what it should be. And then it goes into testing. This testing here is more like systems testing. So it's with real phones and with real things. And then it would go into a queue waiting for deployment. The deployment happened every 2 weeks. That was because we had 2-week sprints previously. So the cycle time was from that. And then it would go into production. And then we also had a phase where it said verified in production because it was possible that something went into production or went into waiting for deployment, and it had waited there for 2 weeks until it went to production. And then when it went to production, something went wrong, and no one actually noticed because it was in production and we just forgotten about it. So when that happened once, we just added that from production, someone has to make sure that it actually works in production once it's taken into production, and then it's verified. And so here are the lanes, and the numbers here are the WIP limits on this system. So there's WIP limits. These are easy. There's 3, and that's the WIP limit for the whole column. 3 for whole column, 3. But then, what do you say about this one? What's the limit? What does this limit? What's the area? Yeah, so it's this area. And this area here. So what this also means is that if we want to change focus, if we want to focus more on the new product that's coming out, what do? Yeah, minus the rest, take something out, and put something more here. Yeah, so we can easily change our emphasis, basically. And yeah, that was a neat thing. And where does the maximum or the maximum number or the sum of these, where does that come from? Or did you have a question?
Yeah, that was my question. Like, you're relating it to the number of tests you're doing in the team.
Yeah, there was actually a secret formula that I'm going to expose to you guys. Actually, we had around 15 developers. So how we calculated the maximum, like the sum of whips, was that we take the number of developers divided by 2 because we were trying to do pair work, so that everything would be worked on in pairs, and then we'd remove a little. And why did we remove a little? Slack, yeah. So there's definitely like the point of slack, but there's also the point that like if something gets stuck in testing, there's an item or an issue in testing, then we need to have people to be able to work on that too. So that's one reason why we need Slack in the system. Yep, go ahead.
The number is like the same across the columns, or is that the total number, which is 15?
No, this was just for this. So this was just for this. So these numbers, for example, this one came from the fact that we had one tester. Well, POs we had several, but it didn't really make sense to have more than 3 ongoing at the same time, and same with UI review.
Okay, so it's by skill set and which column you would say, well, depending on
Yeah, yes. Yeah. And that's basically how you get started. I mean, that's how you get the initial numbers. But then you can just adjust the system once you learn how it works and what works. Yes. There's also a really important detail here that everything is divided into in progress and done. Why? Or most is.
It doesn't move across until you're ready to move it across.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a signal to pull. So we want to create a pull system where work is pulled into the next phase and not pushed. So if we didn't have the done columns here, then that would mean that when the UI review is finished, they would move it to PO review, which would mean that they are pushing it to the next phase. But now when they are done, they just move it to done. And PO review people who are working in that column, they move it here. They pull it. Good question. What do you guys think? So, if there's let's say if there's 3 items here in done, are you allowed to bring in more work into UI review? No. Yeah. That's the point, that you're not allowed. And what can you do in that situation? Yeah. Try to help out. Try to figure out where can you help that you can actually remove that bottleneck that's ongoing.
You're not allowed to go and do PO review.
Yeah, there are definitely constraints constraints that you can't do all of these phases. Yeah, that's definitely true. But once again, I think that personally that when a WIP limit is reached and we'd want to go over it, that's a point for discussion. That's when we should discuss whether it might in some cases make sense to just go over it. And that's it. We just have 4 items and that's it. Or then we can, temporarily. Or then it might mean that we need to change the WIP. Or then it might mean that we have a problem somewhere and we need to fix it. But the important thing is that if the WIP limit is reached and we kind of want to go over it, then we actually want to have a discussion on it.
Would you think about reducing the sort of previous columns? So maybe reduce WIP in dev so that you're not getting so much queued up?
That's one. Yeah, that's one solution that could work. Yes, yeah. But there's others too. I mean, of course, like adding more people to be able to do these different phases, or getting rid of some of the phases maybe, or there's plenty of things that you can do.
How do you do with blocked items?
Yeah, the blocked items were simply marked with. If something got blocked, it was this simple. Wherever it was, And for example, if something was blocked in PO review, does it move back or does it stay there? Yeah. This is once again details. I mean, you can implement this in whatever way you want. But on our board, we decided that we wanted to stay there. That we'll just like I said, there's there's Slack in this dev area, so people will be able to work on it, even though it's in PO review and it stays there.
Does that count towards the width of the PO review?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so I'm just trying to think of ways we do it at the moment. So we'll sometimes have stories which end up being blocked for a couple of weeks because we've got a dependency on another team.
Yeah.
Then a discussion point to see whether it's a temporary increase in width.
Yeah. And you might decide that it's kind of okay. Or then like there's different ways of handling it. I've seen some teams have like a separate box for items that are like blocked for a longer period of time. But the problem with that is that they often end up like being these like trash columns. But you can also have like a WIP limit for that. That this like trash column is also WIP limited. And when it gets to 5, then you have to have a discussion on like what are we going to do with the fact that we have so many things waiting. Yeah, you can add a buffer in between here. Yeah, that's true.
I was going to ask a question.
Yep.
In the dev for this work, you've got
Yes, thank you for asking. I should have explained that. Yes, yes, good. So the idea is here that these are features, and we're limiting these. These are tasks. So you can have as many tasks as you like. These are developer tasks. We were limiting the amount of features that we have. Thank you for asking. Yeah, you had a hand. Yeah. That kind of compensates when you leave early. Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you've, forgive me if you've already covered this, but have you found a successful way to bring UX into your Kanban strategy, or do you just not even get to this point until after we know what we're developing, what the screen looks like?
Well, in this system, we actually had it as a pre-phase. So we actually had 2 boards, and you can actually see it in this picture that we also had a board here. And this was kind of like the pre-phases to this board. So we called this board over here the warm-up board, and this board here the action board. And basically the UI stuff was done in the pre-phases, and they were done most often for bigger chunks, so for several features at a time. Yeah, exactly. And then it would like trickle across over here.
And when they trickle across, at that point you break them out into...
Yeah, actually that breaking also happened already here on this board. And then the features would only walk here. And in the beginning we also we tried to visualize where is the epic going? I mean if an epic is divided into several features, how do we know when the epic is done? And we were trying to we had different ways of visualizing it. One of them was that we had the epics above the board, and it was just at the left it's 0 and on the right it's 100. And we'd kind of do okay, this is 30% done or 60% done, just a rough guess of where it was. And we tried that for a while, but then we realized that actually the POs didn't need that. They knew, I mean, they were focused on the epic, and they constantly knew that, okay, there's still these 3 things that need to be finished for that epic to be finished. They didn't need that. So then we just stopped doing it. Very simple. One more thing that I want to cover with you guys is the daily agenda. So we had a daily meeting in front of the board every day at 10 o'clock with 25 people present. And that means that you have to be very brief, and you have to have a very well facilitated daily, and doing it the Scrum style that everyone tells everyone what they've been doing, what they're going to do, and if they have any obstacles, that's going to take hours. And so what we went for instead is this. We had an agenda for the daily that we walk through every day, and here it is. Expedites. Yeah, I didn't even explain the expedite lane. So we had an expedite lane, which is for emergencies. So basically things like production errors that we needed to fix. And if something was on the expedite lane, it was priority. You had to work on it if you could. Yeah, there's a lot of like stories about the expedites. For example, in the beginning we agreed that there's no WIP limit for it because if it's a production issue, it has to be fixed. There's no saying that we can't take it in because the WIP limit is saying something. But then there was constantly like 3 or 4 items on the expedite lane. And when I tried asking the POs, like, is this really production critical thing? They were always like, yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. And then when this had been going on, I mean, the POs could also see the effects. I mean, it's kind of like the same thing. It's like if you have 1 ambulance on a street, it's fine. But then if you have 4 ambulances on the same street all the time, then it's going to affect traffic. And the POs were already seeing that. So then at some point we were kind of thinking that maybe we should try to have a WIP for the expedite lane. And then we added a WIP that there's only 1 item on the expedite lane. And after that, there was always only 1 item on the expedite lane. Never zero, never zero. But the point was that they were also fine. I mean, nothing broke. Nothing like the world didn't disappear or get destroyed, even though we limited the amount of items on the expedite lane. Okay, yeah, back to...
Was there a waiting list to be answered?
No. I think it was just like they kept it in their heads. Yeah, so in the daily, we first talk about the expedites. So if there's something that we can do with the expedites and try to figure out if we can make them go through the system faster. Number 2, build. If the build was broken, we'd assign someone to fix it. Number 3, we walk through all the items from right to left. So everything that's on the board, we walk through it, we ask like, what's going on with this one? And the people who are working on it say something about what's going on with it. Why is it from right to left? Well, simply to emphasize that the items on the right are more important than the items on the left, because they're closer to being finished.
What questions are you asking about the item?
It was basically, I didn't even ask a question. I would just point at it, and people would say what's going on with it. So basically what we were interested in, of course, is obstacles or things that need to be shared to everyone.
Did you skip the done names? Things that are done?
No. Yeah, for everything.
So if it's waiting to be picked up by somebody, that's all you have to say about it?
Yeah, or if there's something that you need to like hand over, information that the other phase needs to know about. Yep.
Did you have a WIP for a member in your team?
I'm sorry? Well, WIP for?
Did you have a WIP for a member in your team? Like you say, oh, it's 1 item per person, or
Nope.
somebody like that 10 and nothing.
No, it was just these. Yeah.
Does that mean, sorry, that you could have the same person working on 5 different tickets?
Yeah, I guess
It's the same guess, yeah.
I guess the system kind of allows it, but it doesn't really happen. I mean, I guess we would have had a system to prevent it if we had to, but it didn't happen. Yeah. Then, do we need planning? So, do we need to do planning? So if there's WIP available here, planning meant that we move an item from backlog to dev and create the task for it. So if there's WIP available, then we might want to do planning. And for planning, we want to have 3 developers, a tester, and a domain specialist there. And if we did this, if someone said that we need to do planning, then I just take the names of the people who would go to that planning, and I'd stick it on the item that was going to be planned, and they'd work out when to do the planning by themselves and do it. And number 5, the last thing here was notification. So if there's something that you need to notify everyone of, then there's a spot, but this is not a spot for discussions. So if you want to have a discussion, you say that I want to have a discussion after the daily, and those who are interested can stay, but others can go. Or that I want to have a discussion at 1 o'clock in the cafeteria today about why our build has been broken for 5 days or something like that. But it's just notifications, not discussions. And that's it. And the important thing here is that this was our Kanban system, and if you do this, it's going to be different, and it should be different. Because this was designed for our demand and for our situation, and it doesn't move across that easily. I mean, you can take ideas from this, but try to apply them to your context. And how do you get started with this? Well, start with what you do now. Start visualizing more than you visualize now. start limiting WIP, so these are coming from the core practices, and start managing flow. That easy. Thank you.